Is there something dangerous or retrograde or reactionary about positing a human nature? If evolution gave the mind a certain structure, does that mean that it's hopeless to try to make the world a better place because people are wired with ugly motives like jealousy and greed and dominance, and so hope for progress is futile because people just screw it up no matter what you do? It's human nature. We're built that way. And I got a lot of political pushback of the idea of human nature along those lines, and that's kind of a left-wing kind of a objection. The right-wing objection is, well, if you're saying that it's all machinery, it's all evolved neural circuitry, where does that leave the soul and free will and responsibility? And isn't it giving people an excuse to act in accord with Darwinian instincts? My adaptations made me do it. My amygdala made me do it. And are you undercutting all morality and decency by pushing a biological understanding of the mind? So I dealt with that in a book called The Blank Slate, The Modern Denial of Human Nature, denying the premise that a belief in human nature somehow undercuts hopes for progress or meaning or morality. That on the contrary, I think a robust understanding of human nature is a prerequisite to making the world a better place. You've got to look at what humans are like in order to figure out what could make them behave better. And in the blank slate, I pointed out that it's not just a question of kind of philosophical analysis that human nature does not logically imply fatalism about the human condition, but you just open your eyes and you look at the human condition and you see it obviously has improved. We aren't involved in constant tribal warfare where women from one band are abducted by another. We don't burn heretics at the stake or break people on the wheel. We don't have legalized slavery. First of all, why were our ancestors so violent? Why is the default in human life, I think, some rate of violence that today we would not accept? And what did our ancestors do to drive it down? What are the degrees of freedom? What's the plasticity in human behavior that would allow a rate of homicide to fall by a factor of 50 over 800 years, or that would suddenly allow people to stop going to war? It can't be that we just have this inner thirst for blood that periodically has to be slaked. Violence is not like hunger or thirst or the need for sex or the need for sleep. Clearly it is adjusted by circumstances. And the reason it can be adjusted is that whatever violent urges we have, what I call the inner demons, things like urge for dominance, thirst for revenge, tendency towards sadism, sheer exploitation, using someone as a means to an end. That's not all there is in human nature. Human nature is complex. And together with these various temptations toward violence, we have a number of things that inhibit us from violence. We've got self-control, these massive circuits in the frontal lobe of the brain that can count to 10, hold your horses, save your money for a rainy day, and make us think twice before lashing out in violence. There's empathy. Under certain circumstances, we feel other people's pain. We don't want to hurt them. We want to prevent them from suffering. There are norms, moral norms. There are certain things you just don't do if you want to be considered a decent person. There's reason. Can we treat violence as a problem to be solved, the same way we solve problems like disease and hunger? And what changes over the balance of history, what allows, over the course of history, is the balance between the inner demons and the better angels, and that's where societal, historical, institutional changes can come in. You could have institutions like government that penalize impulsive violence or predatory violence, and since we do take in information about the environment, if we think that the police are going to haul us off to jail if we stab someone over a parking space, maybe we'll think twice about stabbing someone over a parking space. Norms change so that lashing out when you're insulted is no longer a sign of manliness, but now is a sign of boorishness. Then people are more likely to adhere to that norm. If we, in general, are more enlightened and educated, and no matter how much we are fired up by patriotism and jingoism, we think, well, gee, the other side is too, and our ancestors were and got them into a whole lot of trouble, like in World War I. Maybe we should think twice, stand back, reflect, and figure out how to get out of this pickle instead of pushing it through to the bitter end, then our cognitive processes of reason can pull us away from violence. So the three components, what makes us violent, what makes us nonviolent, what changes in our society to favor the latter over the former. That's the way I tell the story. I think at the most global level of understanding what the mind is, certainly the fact that it's implemented in brain tissue is a indispensable part of the story. I don't think there's a soul, there's no free-floating entity called the mind that is anything other than activity in neural networks. On the other hand, in order to understand human affairs, the level of brain physiology and anatomy may not be the most perspicuous one. It may not give you the insight that you want, even though ultimately that's where it all is. Sometimes you have to look at a higher level of analysis, at the content of ideas, at the social networks that propagate ideas, and your answer may not be uncovered by studies of neural networks. Just as if you're criticizing a movie, you get your DVD and the movie is nothing but the little pits in the DVD. But on the other hand, if I ask you, is this an original film? Is it a witty film? Is it a hackneyed film? Putting the DVD under a microscope and looking at the pits is just not going to give you the answer. What's the deal with Homo sapiens? What makes us what we are? Why are we such a weird primate? I think it's a combination of three major things. One of them being know-how, that we figure out how the world works and we manipulate it to our advantage with tools and other things to a much greater extent than any other animal. We have language, so we can share the fruits of our discoveries and we can coordinate our behavior in large ensembles by striking deals with each other. And we are social. We cooperate with non-relatives. Very unusual in the animal kingdom. But we have that triad, each one of which supports the other two. And that's the starting point for understanding our very odd species. From that, questions like how do we learn? What is education for? When do we get along? When do we not get along? What would allow us to get along better? I think has to refer back to our nature as a species, including that triad. And by the way, it's because of our capacity for know-how, for coming up with new ideas, that believing in human nature does not make you a fatalist. You aren't just stuck with the way we've always done things, not because of any magic, not because any soul transcends our biological limitations, but because one of the bits of our biology can crank out new ideas by combining old ideas through analogy and composition. And so the reason we're not stuck with the way we've always done things is that we can come up with new ideas and we can share them through language. We can keep the ones that work, tinker with them, and that is a kind of an avenue towards improving our lot, given the materials we have to work with.